Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Helen Gray and I'll be clerking this afternoon. We have a first item of business that's slightly different today. Unfortunately, Councillor Maxsood has submitted her apologies today and Councillor Walshaw has been nominated as her substitute and also as chair of the meeting. So the first action of the committee today is to elect a chair, and I'm hoping that you'll support Councillor Walshaw's nomination as chair today. Thank you very much, members. Chair, if I run through this. Sorry, do you want to speak first? Sorry.
No, lead off. I'm entirely in your hands.
Apologies, Chair. So if I just run through the standard agenda items. So under item number 1, there are no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Item 2, there's no exempt information contained within the agenda today. Item 3, there are no late items of business or supplementary items added to the agenda. Item 4, could I ask members to make any declarations of interest, please? Thank you, I'll take that as none. And that just leads us on to the minutes, Chair.
Good afternoon, folks. Thanks for supporting me as chair. I feel somewhat like the substitute science teacher in a geography lesson. So been usually on planning and climate and things, so please be gentle with me this afternoon. We've got what looks like quite a busy agenda, so let's move straight through to, and if Councillor Illingworth, if you could please put your device to silent, that would be really great. I understand, colleagues, I've got somewhat truncated availability, so if we move swiftly through items, I think that'd be really helpful. So possibly we always do introductions on this committee? So we'll just go around to my left. So just anyone doesn't know, I'm Councillor Walshaw, heading in Hyde Park Ward.
Kate Sadler, lead officer on the committee.
Councillor John Illingworth from Kirkstall Ward.
Paul Swell, councillor from Middleton and Belle Isle.
Councillor Pauline Graham, Crossgates and Winmore Ward.
Councillor Mike Foster, representing Ardsley and Robin Hood.
Good afternoon. Gower Almas, councillor for Beeston Holbeck Ward. Thank you.
Mary Hasnip, head of finance within corporate financial management.
Louise Ivans, principal audit manager.
Angela Laycock, principal audit manager.
Jonathan Foster, senior audit manager.
Sonia McDonald, head of shared services.
Richard Hodgson, customer relations manager.
Aaron Linden, information governance manager and interim DPO.
Victoria Bradshaw, chief financial officer.
Gareth Mills, Grant Thornton, external audit.
Paminda Sethi, Grant Thornton, external audit.
Afternoon, Rebecca Roberts, legal officer.
Linda Wild, independent member.
Jackie Shemilt, Horsforth Ward councillor.
Peter Aaron Overdy, ward councillor. Jonathan Bentley, councillor for Wheatwood.
Helen Gray, and I'm clerk for today.
Great. Thanks very much, everybody, for those introductions. Just hope there's not a test on everyone's names later, because I'm probably not going to remember all of you. There's quite a few people in the room. So in that case, let's move to item 5, the minutes. So, Kate, how do you normally do minutes on this committee?
We do their correct record, and then we do matters arising. I've got the matters arising.
Okie dokie. So minutes item 5, page as 7 to 16. Has anyone got any points to make on the minutes? I'm not going to intend to go through them page by page, but are they a true record then? A member's content? Yep. Okay, then that's nods around the room. Fantastic. Okay, matters arising, please.
So matters arising, there's just 2 minutes to update. Minute 69, the data protection officer, one of the last things she did before she left the authority was to circulate the benchmarking data on the 7th of February. So members should all have had that. And minute 71, which was the statement of accounts and audit, we've got Grant Thornton's representatives to give an update.
Thanks. I'll kick off, Chair, if I may. So the audit does remain ongoing at present. We've received some of the information that was outstanding as at the last committee, and we're currently working through that as much as possible that we can do by the end of April. But we've had to obviously plan our other audits in this period, and our NHS ones in particular. There are certain aspects of information that remain outstanding, which we will need in order to conclude the audit. Parminder and I had a very good conversation with Victoria this morning. The plan is to ensure that that outstanding information is with us by the week commencing 27th of June, after we finished our NHS audits, so that we can work through that information in June with a view to concluding the audit by the end of July. There is an additional national issue that has arisen since the last audit committee, which has added some additional work for both the council and ourselves in respect of the valuation of infrastructure assets. So that's things like bridges and roads. There's been an issue highlighted by the regulator that as a sector, local authorities may not have been accounting for that appropriately, and external auditors as a sector perhaps not focusing on that particular area in as much detail as perhaps they should have done. So that's leading now to a number of local authority finance teams and external auditors having to do quite a bit of work around getting to a position where we are comfortable in terms of the accounting for infrastructure assets, and there's quite big numbers involved here if you look on the council's balance sheet. So I suppose that's an overarching position of where we're at. I don't know if there's anything either Parminder or Victoria might wish to add to that. Okay.
Thanks for that. Do any members have any questions on that update? Matters arising? No. Okay, then. In that case, we will move on to item 6, then, the annual assurance report on customer contact. I think that's Sonia. Over to you.
Chair. Thank you. Yes, this is the annual report on customer contact and satisfaction for 2021. The report focuses on the arrangements in place for customers that may access services through the council's website, through the contact centre and through face-to-face services. It also sets out the central arrangements for compliments and complaints. The report concludes that the arrangements in place are fit for purpose, appropriate policies, principles, standards and procedures are in place to define the control environment for customer contact, and there are appropriate groups for monitoring, oversight and accountability. I will just pull out a few key points from the report for members' attention. Firstly, face-to-face services. This includes services that the Communities Housing and Environment Directorate provide in libraries, job shops and customer services, and that includes council tax, housing and benefits. The level of customer contact for those services during 21 stayed broadly similar to 2020. During the year, new community hub developments have been completed and some are planned. There was a review of community hub and library opening hours, and some community hub sites were used as vaccination venues during the year. There have been a number of changes due to COVID that the service will seek to embed long term. They include the use of phone and video appointments for customers. In terms of the contact centre, that's the first point of contact for many of our customers who have a query or require a service from the council. During 2021, the contact centre received around 1.4 million telephone calls covering over 20 different service areas, and dealt with over 250,000 emails and admin. The answer rate for telephone calls within the contact centre during 21 reduced compared to 2020, and the average length of time for a call to be answered has increased. We've set out the reasons in the report for that, but I did want to assure members of the work that's happening to respond to that. We're increasing our staffing numbers. We're working with service areas to identify and address root causes for contact, and we're working with IDS and service areas to improve digital options that customers have so that they can self-serve at their own convenience. We're also working with colleagues in the digital inclusion service to improve the ability for customers to access our services easily in a way that best suits their circumstances. Not all of our customers will be able to transact with the council online, and some contact is dealt with better face-to-face or over the telephone. So alternative non-digital options will always remain available. In terms of customer satisfaction, the contact centre launched a new satisfaction survey in January 2022. Now that is outside of the period of assurance for this report, but I did want to include the scores for the month of January to provide an indication of satisfaction levels. The feedback is really important for us. We use it for our quality assurance purposes, for individual coaching and training, but also more widely. For example, the scores show that there's scope to improve the availability and accessibility of some of the information on the web. So there's a programme of work that's focusing on that area. Complaint volumes increased during 2021 compared to 2020 by around a quarter, both at stage 1 and stage 2. Complaint volumes decreased in 2020 at the early stages of the pandemic. And that was linked to the suspension of non-essential services in housing and the standing down of certain services in waste management. As the pandemic progressed, complaints increased as service levels were impacted by the ongoing pressures from the pandemic. The pandemic has also impacted on complaints being responded to within target timescales. The figures in the report for 2021 show that performance in that area does need to be improved, and work is underway with the customer relations team and within services to increase awareness on outstanding complaints and focus on early resolution of issues. Common areas of complaints and actions taken to improve by directorate are in the report. So members are asked to note the assurances provided in the report, please, and the plans in place to improve the arrangements and the customer experience overall. Before I ask for questions, I will just say at this point that my colleague from face-to-face services is unable to attend. He's poorly, he's tested positive. So if there are any questions around face-to-face, I will need to note those down and ask for a response to be arranged and circulated after the meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much for that report. Are there any members got any questions? Councillor Ingworth, then Councillor Truswell.
It's better. Two issues I want to raise it on relation to telephone contact, which is, to my mind, one of our areas of weakness where improvements necessary. And the first of two examples is a person in a fairly junior grade at work who was restricted to phoning in their tea break. So they can't just phone any old time in the morning. They have a narrow window of opportunity to make contact, very commonly about housing repairs, where particular problems with the contractor, I think, in this respect. And if the poor person doesn't get through, they face quite significant financial losses into having to take extra time off work and so forth. I'm looking at the times on page 30, which give the response time, and it's not good enough, is it? I mean, basically, it's something where we need to improve dramatically. 61 is it seconds to answer at an average contact time. It's really quite a lot. That's 10 minutes. It's not good, but it's the average. So I must say I'm shocked by these figures on page 30. But I do want to say that, well, we just need to improve there, and we need to be more realistic about whether the tenants at work, whether they can reply quickly, and make sure that we're actually fit for purpose and doing the job which the public pays us to do. The second is a slightly different case, where in Kirkstall we've recently had the pleasure of heat pumps and conversion of high-rise blocks to low-carbon heat. And so I'm very enthusiastic about this and pushing it to go ahead and want it to be a success. And it's not been quite as smooth as I was hoping for. There is a helpline for tenants to phone in case of difficulty, but it doesn't appear to be connected to anything, so that people make a phone call, they're told they will phone back, and then nothing happens because it's sort of not joined up internally. And the same point has come to light is that we were told before the work started that all the sort of green doctor jobs had been done on these buildings, that they, block holes in windows had been dealt with, and it's very obvious from the feedback we've had subsequently that that wasn't the case, just simply wishful thinking. No green doctoring done, and so people complaining about lack of performance when in fact it's a howling gale blowing to the flat because they haven't actually fixed the thing. Anyway, I don't want to take too long, but those are two issues where I'm aware of deficiencies in the service where I think we could just do an awful lot better with a bit of planning and organisation.
Thanks, Councillor Illingworth. Should I take these in a group, Sonia, and then do you want to respond to a group? Is that okay? I don't know how you guys usually do things, but so.
Suggest that we respond to Councillor Illingworth's questions. I've got quite a few.
In that case, Sonia, could you respond to Councillor Illingworth's questions? Thanks.
Certainly, Chair. Yes, I completely agree, Councillor Illingworth. The response times, the wait times on telephones. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me? Sorry. No, I completely agree with your comments around the answer times, Councillor Illingworth. We have got a robust improvement plan in place to address that. We are working with service areas to really understand the root causes of the contact so that we can help services get things right first time to avoid the need for people to contact us in the first place. But as an immediate action, we are bolstering our numbers in the contact centre so that we have the numbers that we need to deal with the contact that we're getting through at the moment, so that we can give that service to the customer. I will just give assurance to members that we have risk assessed our lines so that the high priority lines, the customers, the lines that we definitely need to answer very quickly if there's any issue around vulnerability, safeguarding, etc. We have got those lines prioritised. So yes, the average waiting time over the year was 10 minutes, but the average waiting time for the high priority lines is much less. We have been to scrutiny board to talk through these issues in detail and work through the improvement plans, and we'll be reporting progress back to that group in the coming months. Your question around the low carbon line, I'm not aware of that, Councillor. Please send me the details through, I'll look into it.
Thanks for that, Sonia. That's really helpful. In that case, Councillor Trizzle, with your many questions.
Well, don't overdo it. Yeah, I mean, obviously we're talking about an absolutely vital frontline service by which the council is measured by many people, and hopefully it helps to maintain or even improve our reputation, as well as picking up not just individual issues, but maybe ones that are setting some sort of training. I understand when we talk about high priority, but at the end of the day, I think if you're an individual citizen of Leeds and you phone up the line, you regard yourself as a priority, and clearly we recognise in here that the current performance is totally unacceptable, and it's pleasing to hear that there is a robust plan in place. So just going through at the bottom of page 28, paragraph 29, it talks about customer satisfaction with face-to-face services continuing to be at 99% based on 2000 figures. Now, I don't know whether this is my failure to command the English language, but saying that it continues at 99% of satisfaction based on 2020 figures doesn't seem to read quite logically to me. So really just wanted to pick up on that. On page 29, we've got figures relating to January 22 and December 2020 and January 21 to December 2021. I just wondered if it would be possible to have the figures for the previous year so that we have an entirely non-COVID previous year to compare those figures with. On the staffing issue that's addressed in paragraph 33 on page 30, I just wonder if we could have more of an insight into the reason why we think there's been this exodus of staff. I think we can probably guess and read between the lines, but I just wondered if there were exit interviews or any feedback that gave us more of an insight as to why we've had very stable level of staff and then all of a sudden everyone's packing their bags. And there's a a sentence that says, in addition, the complexity of inquiries has also increased, leading to longer call times. How have we assessed that increase in complexity? It would be interesting to have some insight into that. On page 31, table 8, the 5th question down, is this the first time you've contacted us about this query? And 68% of people say yes, it is, but that means that almost a third have probably been having more than one, as I read this, probably been having more than one go. And I just wonder if there is any way we can assess why we've had these kind of repeat queries from people. I think I've almost finished. As part of our contact with people, and there was a very reassuring reference in what the officer said to digital inclusion, but is there any way we can perhaps think about capturing whether the people who phone us up are digitally capable and might have access to service in a different way? And if we can get back to them, maybe just with a short email saying, thank you for calling us. Do you appreciate, or do you do you appreciate that you could have made your query in a different way online? And I suppose I'll make this my final question because I am going on. Page 34, there is recognition, paragraph 42, that responses within target have been lower than would have been expected, and we've heard the reference to a robust recovery plan, or however we might describe it. But are we keeping figures, and do we have figures on a month-by-month basis that might show hopefully an upward trajectory? Because I would hate to be waiting another 6 months or another year on this committee to have the figures that demonstrate that one way or another. I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Councillor Treswell. And when you said you had many questions, you weren't underselling. No. So never knowingly undersold. Sonia, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Councillor Truswell. I'll do my best with the questions. You might need to just prompt my memory as we go through. The point that you make, the point number 29, so continues to be at 99% satisfaction levels based on the previous year. I agree, it's the wording's not correct there. I'll feed that back to face-to-face colleagues. I can arrange for the figures for 1920 to be circulated to members after the meeting. The point around on paragraph 33 around the staff leaving. Yeah, we undertake exit interviews for everyone who leaves the contact centre, and the key reasons for leaving were promotion opportunities. Most of the people that left during the year left for promotion within the council. A lot of our customer service officers get a lot of, they're very well trained and they've got a lot of experience in housing in particular, and move on to roles within housing. So they've promotion opportunities, career development. We are looking at career development within the contact centre. We're trying to carve out career pathways now across shared services, which will hopefully address some retention issues moving forward. But one of the other things that has come out of the exit interviews this year is that some of our customers are more verbally abusive, and that is something that we're very mindful of. So we have processes around that as well. So they're the key reasons for that we've got from those exit interviews. In terms of the increasing complexity of the calls, the average handling time is something that we also record. We haven't put it in this report, but we can drill down per service line how long calls are taking, and generally calls are taking a little bit longer. For example, in registrars, we have had a lot more calls on registrars in 2021 compared to previous years because of obvious reasons, and the backlogs in registrars, customers having to call and reschedule wedding plans and that sort of thing. So calls have taken longer to deal with some new areas of contact, really. So it was table 8, question 5. Did we resolve your query on the call? Sorry, no, is it the first time you've contacted us about this query? Yes. So we do know that we have an unacceptable amount of repeat contact, and we do have work in place to try and understand that more, so that we can address the root causes of that. I do feel as though we've probably had people phone us and abandon calls this year in 2021 because of the wait times, and they have tried and repeated again. But that is something that we're looking at, Councillor Trustwell. In terms of people who phone us, could they access services in a different way? We do on certain lines have a script for our customer service officers to ask them and alert them to the fact that they are able to do this particular service online. Do they need any support to do that? So that is something that we are going to bring out more widely during this year. And for the point about complaints, I'll pass over to my colleague, Richard.
So the question you're asking around the information in point 42, regarding, I believe you asked if there's month by month comparison for sort of complaint trajectory, is that right? Sorry, I'm not quite. Sorry, the question was in respect of point 42 around sort of responses within timescale under the complaints policy. And you'd asked if we have month by month sort of data on that. Sorry, we do have we have quite a centralised complaints dashboard where we can provide information by service area, by stage of complaint, and sort of responses within timescale at whatever stage. So we can provide that information if you would find that beneficial to sort of see the responses within timescale. It just because complaints covers everything. Some areas receive a lot more, the sort of areas receiving more complaints, typically sort of housing leads and waste management. But depending on where the interest is and what you would like to sort of understand, I can provide more information around sort of response rates by area, by month. We can take that information all the way back to 2019 with the information we have now. So if there's anything you would like to know specifically, I can provide that.
Well, I suppose the reason I asked the question, Chair, and there may be lots of other potential benefits from it, is so that given the fact that we're not in a good position at the moment, we've got this robust plan of recovery, and if we could see month on month whether we're improving, that I think would be a reassurance certainly to me, and I think to the committee. So that was my reason for asking that question, rather than waiting months into the future to see whether the robust plan is actually bearing fruit. And the final comment I make is that it's very reassuring to hear that a number of staff are leaving for very positive reasons. But I suppose my question was to some extent prompted by the fear that the pressures, including abuse, and the fact that perhaps staffing levels aren't what they were, and the volume of work was perhaps causing people to burn out and look for another job rather than the one that they were doing with us.
Yeah, there's been a great deal of sorting of people in jobs and moving around, hasn't there? So I've got Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report, Sonia. It's nice to see you back on the committee. You thought you'd seen the last of us. Just going back to a question that Councillor Illingworth asked, was really about customers making calls during the working day and being limited to how much time they had. A lot of service providers now don't just work 9 to 5 on their telephone service, they extend their time. And I just wondered whether there are any plans looking at that, particularly if we're perhaps pushing more down the digital route, and the time saved on that in the contact centre could then be invested in extending the time so that you were actually meeting customer needs in terms of when they can contact you. So that's really that question. And also about redirecting people to the digital line. You say that the call agent in some occasions will tell the customer, you could have made this inquiry in another way. Is there any way that you could put that message on whilst the customer is waiting? Again, a lot of service providers do that. They're saying, rather than wait, 3 minutes, 4 minutes on the call, you could be online getting your answer. So I just wondered whether that was in part of your planning. But if we are directing more customers down that digital route, I think we've got to be a lot smarter in closing the loop in terms of when the customer has gone online to raise a question. Because a lot of the complaints that I get as a councillor, I'm sure my colleagues do as well, people saying, we raised this, we went online and heard nothing more. And when we asked a question in council about this, we got the reply, well, there really wasn't a process that made sure that every query that came through was closed off and answered. So I think we've got to be a bit careful about pushing too much down that route if we haven't got a good process to make sure they all get dealt with. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks. Sonia, do you want to speak to that?
Thank you, Councillor Bentley. We don't currently have any plans to change the opening hours of the contact centre, but nothing is ever off the table. I think when we do our analysis, if there is evidence to support us putting a business case forward to change opening hours, we'd certainly look at that. What we are doing is looking at the how much contact we're getting at various times of day, so that we can review our rotas and our staffing presence throughout the day to make sure that we've got the optimum staffing levels. We do have messages on the telephone line, the IVR, to help people find the information on the website. But we do know that our lines, press 1 for this, press 2 for that, it might not always be the slickest for every service that we offer. And that is something that we're overhauling at the moment. We're going through each line to make sure that we've got a streamlined process there and that the messages are at the right point for customers. Your point about the web forms, yeah, I understand. There's around 60 forms that customers can complete, and those forms get sent to the service areas for action. So there would be an individual process for each one of those for the service area to get back to the customer. What we have done is we've looked at the highest volumes of those forms, and I think Miss Bin was the top one for 2021, and new and replacement bin was the second highest, and overall they make up about 48% of the contact through the web forms. So there's been some service redesign work on those forms. The first one was completed in January, and it's already had a good impact. Fewer complaints have come through and more forms have been completed, and the new and replacement bin form went live at the beginning of March. So after a month we'll be able to have a look to see what impact that has made as well. So there's a lot of work going on, and we're trying to do it on a sort of highest volume basis in terms of those web forms.
Thanks for that. Councillor Almas.
Thank you, Chair. Most of what I wanted to ask was covered by Councillor Trustwell and Councillor Bentley. However, it's good to see that the issues around how satisfied were you with the time taken to answer the call, and did you try to find the information you needed on our website before calling has been acknowledged, and hopefully it will be addressed as well in paragraph 36. My question would be around data poverty, because if you're using online services, people don't have enough data as well, because most of the people are using smartphones rather than going online. So what sort of work are we doing in terms of developing an app which doesn't use as much data and also is more user friendly in terms of people using their phone rather than going online on computers and all that? Because that's the kind of issues I'm having in my ward. People complaining, sort of going online, and the system is a bit too complicated for some people to actually look for certain subjects and all that. So I think if we develop an app, it could be more user friendly and easier to access and save data as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I will. I'll raise that with our IDS colleagues. I fully appreciate that point.
Yep, thanks very much for that. Councillor Harron, and then we can wrap this item up, I think.
Thank you. The following paragraph from Councillor Almas's point about it's about collecting the customer satisfaction results that we're interpreting and believing. It says that the previous system provided online customer forms, but now the new solution does not currently have the functionality to issue that customer satisfaction questionnaires. So we consciously decided to collect less customer satisfaction questionnaires. I mean, is that a deliberate policy or is it an accident? That can't be very satisfactory.
I'll pass that on to our colleagues in IDS, Councillor Harron. I'm afraid that's not my area, but I understand the point, and I'll make sure that you have a written response circulated to members.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. Officers, colleagues can't answer particular questions, so we'll move on to that. Right. I think. Oh.
Thank you. Yeah, just 2 points. One's just a bit of a puzzle on table 5 relating to the community libraries. And it was the visits in, I'm guessing this is a typo. In 2020, January to December, there was 616,000 books issued against 265,000 visits, but 21 to 22, 8,000 visits, handed out 687,000 books, which is 85 books per visit. They must have brought wheelbarrows with them or something. So I assume there's an issue there. But the one that did puzzle me a little bit, someone's already mentioned, yeah, we're looking at nearly over 10 minutes to answer a call, considerably higher than the previous year. But the email responses have actually reduced by 30%. So I'm wondering, is that a misallocation of resources? How comes we've managed to reduce the email response by a considerable amount? But having said that, you'd say that was good, but to an overall detriment of, 10% drop in overall satisfaction. So is it a case that people were just in the wrong place, doing the wrong jobs?
Thanks for that, Councillor Foster. I must confess, when you indicated to speak, my mind went completely blank. So my apologies. Officer colleagues, can anyone speak to Councillor Foster's questions?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Foster. Face-to-face isn't my area, but I did query this myself because it did look very strange. So the answer is that the community library visits in 2020 included obviously January, February, March, before lockdown. So that's got all of the visits in there. During 21, there were obviously much less visits, but they had an online click and collect book issuing service. So they were able to continue to issue books without people going in to visit in the libraries. So that's that. Email and phone, I think it's a very valid point, and that is my area, and that's something that I'm looking at. The resource across the contact centre, the emails mainly come in around council tax and adult social care. So we do need to manage the resource on the emails and on the phones, and I agree. We will need to get that balance better.
Thanks very much for that. Right, colleagues, wrapping this item up then, and in my notes here, we're asked on page 17, the recommendations are: the Corporate Governance and Audit Committee is asked to note the assurances provided, and the first bullet is the appropriate systems and procedures are in place in respect of the Council's control environment for customer contact and satisfaction. And the second bullet, that there are robust plans in place for improving the customer experience. Now, judging from the questions on what I've heard today, I would be satisfied that that's the case in both points, but is the committee content? Yep. So, Councillor Truswell.
On the question of the robust plan, I think time will tell.
Well, as
my
always.
Questions and some of our other questions. So presumably we can have a report back within a reasonable period to maybe identify the trajectory.
So the question is, does this committee need a report back if the scrutiny board is also getting, the relevant scrutiny board is also getting a report back on these questions? Councillor Truswell?
Perhaps we could have a report back of the scrutiny board's deliberations.
I think that's a fine idea. Right. In that case, let's wrap this item up. Thank you very much, everybody. If we move then to item 7, the Code of Corporate Governance. Kate, if you'd be so kind.
Yeah. So members will recall back in July, when you considered the interim annual governance statement, you noted that there was a slight shift between SIPFA's recommended principles for delivering good governance and the principles set out in our existing code and framework for local corporate governance, and asked that I reviewed the code. It's having been a little while since it'd been brought into place. So this is offering you a proposed new shorter code of corporate governance, which doesn't include the governance framework. The principles set out reflect very, very closely those set out by SIPFA. The commitments set out within those principles reflect the sub-principles set out by SIPFA, but also the behaviours and actions that SIPFA speak about in their 2016 guidance. Taking the framework out of the Code of Corporate Governance doesn't take away the framework. That framework still exists, but it enables me to report that annually to committee so that it can be maintained currently, because inevitably these things move on. We're always striving to do better, and therefore we're able to capture that by reporting annually through to committee. And that report of both the framework, what we do, and the assurance map, those things that I can point to say, this is why I can tell you that we do that, will then support your judgments around the annual governance statement as those decisions are made. So I would invite you to approve the code as it's recommended.
Thanks, Kate. Members got questions? Councillor Illingworth. Can you use your...
It's better. So I was going to ask Chair about innovation, that there's various functions that will be performed and which are rightly there. But what I was looking for was some sort of encouragement to look at new technology and new developments and introduce them in a rational fashion. I mean, not just simply because it's new, but because it's better if it's properly run.
I guess that would come through in the principles and the commitments around sustainable delivery of our services. So we are asked to continually strive towards finding value for money ways to provide the services within our strategic plan framework. And that will include innovation as well as maintaining services at the standards that we can do within the resources that we've got available to us as an authority.
Yeah. Perhaps the shorter version is every year we've had to do more with less. So, certainly every year that I've been a councillor. Okay, folks, is there any further questions? Then we'll move to the recommendations. If not, no. In that case, on page 47, are we willing point? Recommendation A is approve the local code of corporate governance attached to Appendix A. I read it last night, seemed very sensible. Yep, see nods around the room. Good, good. And note the arrangements for proposed reporting annual and monitoring and compliance. Yep, good, excellent. Okay. We're moving swiftly along then to item 8, the internal audit update report. And Jonathan Foster, can you present? Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the first of 2 items from internal audit. So first up is our update report from the period of December last year to February this year. So the first item in there to draw members' attention to is around sections 2 and 3. So we've recently undergone a bit of an exercise to look at what our current priorities are in the plan and how they align with current risks and priorities in the council. So what that's effectively involved is looking at what we need to deliver now, bearing in mind the fact that the plan has to be flexible in nature. So what was a priority or a big risk when this plan was initially approved by members last year, not necessarily one of the bigger priorities now. Things do get overtaken, and there are audits that we've carried out during the year that have overtaken those on a risk basis. So we've looked at what remains in the plan. And we thought, right, timing wise, what do we need to do now? What are the real priorities that we must deliver now? And they have been the ones that we've focused on immediately. We've then evaluated the remainder of them on a risk basis. So we've looked within that, when would be the most appropriate time to carry this out within a service? What other sources of assurance are we drawing on throughout the year to give us the comfort that those risks are being managed? And we've tried to schedule those accordingly. So this has resulted, as you'll see in the table there, in some audits that are being deferred practically into the 22-23 audit plan, and some audits that are removed on a risk basis because we feel that other priorities have overtaken there. So this has been very transparent over that. And what this does as well is puts us in a stronger position now. So we're not carrying forward an abundance of work in progress. We focus on completing the absolute priorities now. And then we're in a good position to go in 22-23 with the next audit plan, which is obviously the next agenda item up. So the next part of this report to draw members' attention to is around our reports issued during the period. So the main one that you'll probably focus on there and that we would like to draw your attention to is the data protection impact assessments. So this is one where we have provided a limited opinion for the control environment. So a DPIA, as they're called, is a process that needs to be followed where a change in a system or a new system that's coming in has an impact, if you like, on special category data. So the process that needs to be followed will guide that service through making sure that the right things are taken into consideration from an information security and an information risk perspective. So there are some good things within that control environment. There's some strong guidance on what needs to be done and how that needs to be completed. There's a process for escalating some of the particularly high risks. But bearing in mind the fact that it's the services across the council themselves who are responsible for completing these and managing these risks, but obviously this is overseen by our colleagues in IT and information governance, the area that needs the development is the monitoring area of that control environment. So first of all, from the perspective that without a stronger monitoring control, it's difficult to provide the assurance that all of these assessments are being carried out where they need to be. So a recommendation has been agreed to monitor projects and programs that are going on so it can get on the front foot there and make sure that these are ongoing. Another observation was that several of them are still in draft format and are still awaiting approval. So again, stronger monitoring in that area will ensure that is tightened up, bolstered by some regular and effective communication. So all of our recommendations have been welcomed positively by the service and are being taken on. And this is something that we will follow up, and then it is obviously reflected in next year's audit plan, as you will see. So the next section of the report, again, to highlight is the other audit work. So this draws upon the range of other work that we've done, which we take assurance from. And we have tried to take on the suggestion from Linda, the independent member at the last committee, to try and provide some stronger information about the outcomes from that work and the particular assurances that we get from that. So you'll see that obviously within the table there. Customer satisfaction questionnaires, obviously an area which members focus on, the feedback on our performance. So within the period, we got a 50% response rate. So I guess the highlights were in there to draw attention to. Schools, we discussed that at the last meeting, the measures that we've taken to try and bolster the schools response rate, and we've had an encouraging rate from schools and academies during this period, so that's excellent. The drop off in this period is from our external clients, so external organisations to the council. However, I am aware that at least one of those has been engaging with trying to complete one now. It obviously hasn't come through in this period, but we do still try our best to encourage feedback from the external organisations. So finally, within our update reports, there's the Quality Assurance Improvement Programme, which shows the range of activities that we're undergoing from a service improvement perspective. The one that's been added there is around recommendation tracking, and this is a very exciting development for us that will give us more oversight of recommendations routinely that we raise for our audit reports. So this is something that we're well on with rolling out now. We've had some good engagement from services on that, and we hope that this is something that we'll be able to start reporting through to the committee in future periods, which will be obviously a very valuable source of assurance. So finally, we've appended the information on the monitoring of urgent decisions, as we do routinely nowadays. So any questions about the audit report, I will do my best to answer.
Thank you very much. Excellent. Right, questions for Councillor Truswell first up.
Yeah, thanks very much for that comprehensive report. Just I think 3 questions. On page 64 in the table where there have been deferred, added and removed items, could you perhaps elucidate on the Children and Families Commissioning section? Because I think most of the others are self-explanatory, even with the thumbnail description. And also the one at the bottom, Communities, Environment and Housing Disrepair. It would be useful to just have a little bit more of an insight into those. My second question relates to an area which you did cover in some detail, and that's on page 67. It's the reference to the DPIAs. Now, as a ward member, my only what shall I say, experience of DPIAs has been when we've been discussing the siting, permanent or temporary, of CCTV cameras. But I just would like a little bit more insight into where the shortcomings have been and which department and functions this relates to, because at the moment it's really quite general. And my final question relates to the returns, and you did cover that as well. And I'm just wondering, when we talk about external agencies, are we talking about those with whom we have a contractual relationship, or other bodies? And is there anything we can do really to encourage them to return these questionnaires? Because obviously it's an important part of the audit function.
Thanks, Councillor Truswell. Jonathan, do you want to start off with those?
Thank you, Councillor Truswell. So I'll take these in turn, certainly with the ones that I can answer first off. So Children and Families Commissioning to start with. Now, I believe there's a post that's been introduced that's particularly looking at the effectiveness of the commissioning arrangements. And these are joint commissioning arrangements between the council and the NHS, the CCGs. So I believe the NHS part of it is in a bit of a state of flux at the moment around the arrangements that will ultimately replace the CCGs. So it's mainly from a timing perspective, really, that this didn't seem the practical time for us to be carrying out a review such as that while the changes are ongoing, and while there is the post looking at that, where obviously we will keep a watching brief on that to take some assurance from that. So that is the main reason why that one has been deferred.
Could I just, sorry to interrupt, Jonathan, could I just ask why, like others, that wasn't simply deferred for the reason that you've described? Why was it removed completely?
Yeah, I mean, good question. The plan is not finite in terms of the resource that we have, so other priorities have overtaken that one in that area for the time being. But as I say, it is certainly something that we keep a watching brief on, and we do retain an area of contingency, both generally and in specific areas, including children and families. So we do have the opportunity to get involved there should we need to. But at the moment, given that there is a finite resource to deliver the plan, other priorities have overtaken that. So moving on to housing disrepair. Now, this is an area that we've audited in the not too distant past, and no major issues were found at that point. It was something that we put in when the plan was perhaps more heavily weighted towards coverage in the housing area. We've looked to again to balance that in light of immediate priorities across the whole authority. So to take that en masse, really, that decision. So obviously, as part of the planning process, which we'll come to in the next report, we meet with management and we talk about performance in certain areas. And voids is the area that has particularly stuck out, where they would like some assurance on the efficiency and the effectiveness of that void management process. So again, there has to be some judgment there on a risk basis between the two areas. We don't have a finite resource. Disrepair, clearly important area, reputational area, and hugely important. So again, we keep a watching brief on that. We do have the ability to respond to that should we need to, but at the current time, voids are the area that has overtaken that. So I hope that gives you some of the comfort around that. Now, moving on to your further questions. So certainly the external organisations from the CSQ perspective, yes, it is external organisations where we have a contractual relationship to deliver audit work. So The Belle Tenant Management Organisation, which I know you're involved with, they're one of our external clients. We do some work for Aspire, we do some work for Leeds Credit Union and Leeds Grand Theatre. So these are the sort of organisations. So we deliver an audit service in return for a fee for that. But it is still vitally important that we get the feedback from those. So fully take your point on board around that, and we will keep looking at ways of trying to encourage more and more feedback, and perhaps some follow-up process for ourselves where we haven't got things back will help to bolster that in the future. So we have my colleague Angela here, who I think was involved in the DPIA's audit, who might be able to give you a little bit more information specifically around that.
So your question was around, were there particular areas that were more non-compliant than others? No, is the actual answer. We looked across the board, and there are issues in all directorates, but the service have got a project underway to look at their DPIA process, and they've fed all our findings into that project and taken the recommendations on board, and they'll be addressing that as part of that work.
Councillor Trussell, I must apologise. I know there was another question, but I can't for the life of me read my own writing here.
No, I think you've covered them.
Excellent. Aaron from Debt Protection, is there anything you want to add to that, or not, as the case may be?
I can do, Chair, yeah. So I'm 3 months into Leeds City Council, so I was getting up to speed. In fact, it was really, really helpful to see the audit report in terms of the expectations around the service, and we are absolutely reviewing the process. Once we review the process, we then want to work on a system that helps us, basically reducing the margin for error, making sure we build in escalations, making sure we balance the ownership of the service as well as us, and ultimately making a fit for purpose process.
Lovely, thank you very much. Any more comments? Councillor Harron, of course.
Can you just confirm I heard rightly? I was concerned, like Councillor Trussell, about the removal of the Children and Families Commissioning audit. Has that now changed to deferred rather than removed? Because if it isn't, I'd like to recommend that it is. It should be deferred, please. Yes?
We have got it as removed at the moment, but it is an area where we'll keep a watching brief on that. So we do have the opportunity to obviously complete an audit at the right time, but we feel, given that there are changing arrangements there at the moment, and there's no defined date as to when that will be fully determined, now would not be the most logical time for us to plan in that audit. But should things change there, and should we determine, obviously, that becomes a priority, then we do have the opportunity then to complete that one.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree that this is the wrong time. It's probably the right time for you to get involved, but you understand our concerns.
Certainly take note of that, and I'll certainly look for ways that we can draw assurances from that ongoing.
That's helpful, Jonathan. Yes, thanks. Linda, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Just a short question, really, and it's about overall question around the deferred audits, if I may. So I noticed that there's a number of audits deferred or removed around children's services, and also around the children's families and the communities, environment and housing. My question really is, have you, or are you satisfied that you have enough overall assurance in those two areas to enable you to contribute to your head of internal audit conclusion? And am I missing something that you might? I know you talked about the risk being dynamic and you're responding to those, which is brilliant. That's how I would expect it to be. But are you satisfied that you have enough coverage, audit coverage in those two areas to enable you to deliver your conclusion?
The answer to your question there, Linda, is yes. Obviously, that is a fundamental part of that risk assessment. So children's and families, for example, we have had work going on throughout the year, drawing on a range of other assurances as well. We've been involved in dialogue with the service recently around the safeguarding issue that's obviously been quite prominent recently. And we are confident that in conjunction with the other work that we've carried out during the year will give us enough to deliver the opinion in that area. Similarly, communities, environment and housing. We have already delivered a reasonable spread of housing work or housing work that is ongoing at the moment. And I am also aware that there is another prominent piece of audit work in that area. There's just been scoped and kicked off at the moment, which will again feed into that annual opinion. It's not something that was started in time to make it into our work in progress table, but it's another of the priority areas, if you like, that we saw that we wanted to complete within this year's plan. So all in all, that judgment is made as a whole in terms of the whole plan, and we are confident in those areas, as with others, that we will be in a position to deliver that annual opinion, and that we will have completed sufficient work during the first quarter of the next year. Because I think I'm right in saying the annual opinion will be due in July this year. So certainly we are confident that we have the spread of work there.
Thanks very much. That's a very comprehensive answer. Thanks. Councillor Foster. Yep.
Yeah, just one out of the box, I think. I just wanted to know if you've done any internal auditing activity that's related to any risk posed with the war in Ukraine.
We haven't specifically at the moment, Councillor Foster. However, there is obviously a work programme ongoing around the payments that will be made to sponsors that are taking on refugees from the Ukraine. So obviously that requires a system to confirm the validity of those applying for sponsorship and the mechanism of payment for that. And we are involved in a working group ongoing on that. So there's an ongoing piece of work that we're feeding into there that relates to that, but no other specific pieces of work now.
Kate, do you just want to add something? Thanks for that, Jonathan.
Yeah, as members know, we're normally joined at committee by Tim Rollett, who is the authority's lead officer on risk. Unfortunately, he's not able to attend because he's absent with ill health, but he did tell me this morning that he is currently in the process of reviewing the authority's risks around Ukraine and the impact of taking Ukrainian refugees within the city, cyber, you name it, he's looking at it. So it is being reviewed.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody. Don't see any more indications from members. In that case, let's turn to our recommendations, which are on page 57. So forgive me, colleagues, while I read these. Recommendation A is receive the internal audit update report. Recommendation B is no, there have been no limitations in scope and nothing has arisen to compromise the independence of the internal audit. And C, receive the report providing information relating to the monitoring of urgent decisions. Members content to accept those recommendations? See nods and indications? Fantastic. In that case, let's move to agenda item 9, the internal audit plan. Over to you, Jonathan, again. Thanks.
So this report presents our internal audit plan for 2022-23. So the report itself runs through the process that's involved in putting that plan together, including the legal and the regulatory background there. So we have a very well-established planning process that draws upon a number of sources in how we put that plan together. So we obviously take on board the risk register and the key risks to the council at the moment. We consult with various plans. We keep an eye on activities through the various boards and committees and also the published best practices to give us an idea of the auditable areas and the main areas of priority. We also consult with yourselves, obviously, as a committee. We've consulted across the council, so we've consulted with Tom as Chief Executive, Victoria as Section 151 Officer, management across the authority, including the monitoring officer. And we also speak to our core cities partners and our South and West Yorkshire partners. So we build up a balanced risk-based plan there that we feel reflects the priorities and the main risks at the time. So we begin the coming year with a small drop in the resources from where we were at this point last year, although we do anticipate that that will rise during the year. And we have again worked very hard to look at how we maximise the use of that resource. So we've looked at our activities as a team, tried to make sure we have sufficient time there for team development and training activities, for well-being related activities and that sort of thing, but also making sure that we really do maximise the available resource to devote to those core assurance providing activities. So you'll see within the plan, there are a number of specifically defined pieces of audit work where we expect an assurance report. We also draw up on a multitude of other sources, which we class within our productive resource time. So where we attend boards, committees, or where we feed into projects, like I explained to Councillor Foster about the ongoing project there. These are all areas which we bring together to contribute towards that opinion over the course of the year. So if we look at the plan itself, financial risk obviously represents a key theme that runs throughout the plan. I think almost 70% of the planned audits cover an element of financial management. So you'll see there's a column there with the assurance streams that show that even though an audit might not specifically appear to be financially focused, there are areas of financial management within that audit. So we take the assurances from that. Similarly, with the council moving towards cloud-based solutions and obviously cybersecurity still reflecting a very prominent national risk, we've increased the time that we have available to carry out assurance work in the ICT and information governance area. And there are other defined pieces of audit work in the plan that will give us the opportunities to look at the implementation and integration of IT systems as well. Transformation, obviously a very prominent area. So we have a substantial piece of work providing programme assurance around the council's core business transformation programme. That's the one that's focused on the financial, HR and procurement processes across the authority. There are obviously other areas of transformation work going on across the whole council. So again, we have time in the plan to get involved in those to make sure that where services are reshaping the way that they deliver that service, that we are able to get involved there and ensure that they're managing the risks properly there, so that the risks to, I guess, legal and regulatory compliance are fully considered along with that transformation. So coverage across directorates is obviously determined based on the level of perceived risk at the time that the plan is put together. I mentioned in the last report around the need for the plan to be flexible in nature. So obviously, adults and children's time has increased for the coming year, and that will account for some of those audits that we have moved and deferred into the new year for timing purposes. We're also conscious that, for example, in children's services at the moment, there's an ongoing Ofsted inspection, and I believe the report from the Ofsted inspection is due on the 19th of April. So we set aside time to make sure that we can react to the outcomes and the actions that come out of that, so that at that point, we can consider what we need to do with that service to support them in prioritising actions. And again, should we feel that we need to then prioritise a specific piece of audit work in response to that, we have the opportunity to do that because we have the suitable time to respond to new and emerging risks that will give us that opportunity. Tackling fraud and corruption is obviously an ongoing priority and something that we retain some level of ownership over in internal audit. So we have a substantial amount of time in the plan there for us to oversee both the proactive activities, and we've been developing a training programme, which you will have seen in the quality assurance improvement programme. We also maintain the policy framework and look after the whistleblowing arrangements. So we make sure we have the time available there to respond to that, and members will receive the biannual counter fraud updates throughout the year around the activity that we have in that area. So as I say, the plan does retain a good amount of contingency so that we can continue to respond and prioritise. And as you will have seen in the previous report, we are transparent over where there are additions or deferrals or deletions from the plan. So where the risk profile of the authority does change and where the plan does change over the year, those changes will obviously be reported through to members, so members have the opportunity to comment on that exactly as you should. So that is that's my presentation really around the plan. So again, I'm happy to take any questions where they come.
Thank you very much. That was very comprehensive. Questions, colleagues? We good? Councillor as well.
Just one question, Chair, relating to the table on page 97 and the first item regarding audit of COVID grants. Obviously, the issue of the fraudulent claiming of these grants has been a major concern shared across the country at both local and national level. And I'm just wondering, what are we picking up at the moment, and how will this next year's audit continue to scrutinise that issue?
Yeah, excellent question. Jonathan, do you know? Anyone can speak to that? That'd be great.
Hiya. Yes, we're continuing with the post-payment assurance of all the COVID grants that have been issued through the council. This work will continue. We're still paying out Omicron grants, so we're using the NFI tool. We're also using Spotlight, which are digital data matching services. So I will provide an update report in the biannual counter fraud report.
Thanks very much for that. Councillor Druswell?
Can I ask when that will be? Because obviously, I'm sure I'm not the only one who's interested in the answer to these questions. And I reiterate what I asked. What are we picking up in terms of fraudulent claims? Because presumably we have to report this back to the appropriate government department.
I can provide this information outside of the meeting. We've been requested from government to provide analysis of all the fraudulent occurrences within the authority. I believe that is due at the end of May. So the areas that we are picking up, we are looking to recover, refer to the police and other agencies where relevant. So I can't give you the exact figures at this point in time, but I can provide that outside of the meeting.
That's really helpful.
Okay,
thanks.
Chair, that's fine by me. And also, I think the committee would seek reassurance that we have adopted as robust an approach as was possible in terms of the disbursement of these grants.
I'm very sure that's the case. Do we have any further questions? Nope. Oh, sorry, Linda. Of course. Off you go.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just one on resourcing, if I may. In paragraph 3.1, you refer to the size of the internal audit team at the start of this coming year being, I'm guessing at 1 FTE or thereabouts, less than it was at the start of the previous year, there or thereabouts. But you are envisaging that it will increase during the year. And then you go on to say that the audit plan as it's set out for the coming year is around, I think, just short of 200 days more than the previous year. So those figures, I'm assuming, are based on the fact that you will get that additional bum on seat. But even so, is it enough, is my question. Are you satisfied that you have the resource that you need to deliver the plan that you're setting out for us today? And then linked to that is, if you don't get that resource, do you have sufficient contingency to allow you to still deliver the plan that's in front of us? And or which, are you in a position to say which audits would drop off the plan if you were forced in that direction? I'm always mindful, as you said, Jonathan, that the plan is dynamic. It needs to be refreshed on an ongoing basis to respond to risks as they emerge, which is great. But it's good to have in your back pocket the what if. So if you don't get that resource, or if you do get that resource, you're still possibly going to be a bit short. What are your plans if that does come to fruition?
Thank you, Linda. Valid questions, certainly. So first off, I mean, yes, there or thereabouts, it is 1 FTE lower. One of our auditors moved into financial services. But that doesn't, I mean, the increase in productive days for the plan doesn't entirely rest upon that replacement. So there's some foreseen internal movement around increasing hours, for example. And also, as we said in paragraph 3.2 there, we have had quite a squeeze on our time and how we spend our time, and look to prioritise that so that we can devote as much as we can to what we class as productive audit activities. Now, part of that is because we've looked at what we can do differently, and part of that is because we've evaluated how, I guess, we've reported some of this to the committee in the past and what we have reflected as time to contribute to these activities. So perhaps we've done ourselves a disservice in the past by not recording all of the time that we spend on our client liaison activities as core assurance providing activities. So we've tried to be a bit fairer this time in that, because they obviously are activities that do contribute to that opinion, and you do see those coming through in the report. But obviously, as you've highlighted as well, the calculation is based upon profiling over the year of our staffing resource. So we do anticipate, or we have factored in some additional resource, and we are undergoing something of a service review at the moment. It's difficult for me to be able to comment on that. I am obviously part of the audit team, but that service review will obviously look again at the most effective way that we deliver our service, again with a view on making sure that we are getting the absolute most from the resource that we have. So I do feel confident in saying that at the current time, irrespective of any additional resource coming in, we do have what we need to deliver the annual opinion. I would be confident in saying that, but that is obviously something that we have to keep an eye on throughout the year. Obviously, our head of audit meets with Victoria's Section 151 officer regularly, and if we had concerns about our resource position, we would obviously raise it through that route. At the moment, we believe it is okay. In terms of what would drop off the plan first, were we to feel it's at risk, I wouldn't feel I'd be in a position now to give you specific audits that would drop off there right now, but we are trying to obviously get our plan working so that we know what are the immediate priorities we need to do straight away now over the course of the year, so that immediate priorities are done first. And then at a point in time where we look at that, if the resourcing becomes an issue, that's when we would make the decision over any deferral, and we will be transparent about that with the committee through the update reports.
Thank you. That's a really comprehensive answer, and I'm pleased that you're prioritising the audits in order of risk. That's really what I wanted to hear, so thank you for that.
Great. Okay. Any further questions? Nope. In that case, are we prepared to approve the proposed internal audit plan for 22-23? See nods from members around the room. Fantastic. In that case, let's move on to item 12, the work programme. Kate?
This is the work programme for the next municipal year. It's the usual selection of regular updates and annual assurance reports, with 2 extra reports that are coming as ad hoc reports to the committee. First, at the beginning of the year, in relation to the Best City ambition and the governance arrangements that underpin that, to make sure that we really are delivering that strategic plan. And then at the end of the year, a report in relation to our estate management arrangements, which were last considered by the committee back in June 2018. So it's time for an update and a review.
Any questions? Councillor Treswell.
Very last one on the very last page, Appendix B, CIPFA's position statement. I just wonder whether it would be helpful for the committee at some stage to have a report that reflects how far the operation of this committee complies with those elements. I know we do it kind of sporadically in different ways, but it would be a good way of the audit committee auditing itself.
Certainly, the lovely people at CIPFA actually provide us with a pro forma to go through to assess the effectiveness of the committee against their recommendations. We use that as part of our tool when we're drafting the annual report for the committee, which you approve in June. So when we bring that report, we'll try and bring fuller information for you so that you've got those 2 things put together and you have that opportunity to do that audit for yourselves.
Right, I suppose what I'm saying is just to take this line by line and almost reflect in practical terms how we operate. That would be clearer to me, but obviously I'm kind of moving into my dotage and needs things expressing in these very straightforward and easily understood ways.
Thanks, Councillor Treswell. You've only got to start to worry if you need cartoons drawing. I think that's when you really need to start to worry.
Could we have cartoons?
I'll work on it.
Great. Are we prepared to accept the committee's work programme? Yep. Nods and smiles around the room. Fantastic. In that case, it remains just to say that the time and the place of the next meeting is 2 p.m. on Friday, the 24th of June, 2022. Meeting concluded. Thank you all for your attendance and your contributions. And it was a meeting that didn't involve any terrifying climate